What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the channel. We're getting close to the season, but we're talking dynasty trades. We're going to be diving into 4 players from the 2023 class that either you should be buying or selling and just giving you the market. Hey, what is their market out there? What is their outlook? What is their current trade value? That's what we're going to be diving into. So let's start. Will Levis, QB 23 out there, Keep Trade Cut. You see his Keep Trade Cut value. It's stable, right? It goes up and down when you're talking about him. Some people buy in, some people don't as the season goes, but he's pretty much been stable throughout his career, actually. Last year, up and down year, right? When we're talking about his game log and looking at that, he had 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, but he had 4 touchdowns in week 8. After that, he had 4 touchdowns the rest of the season, right? Didn't play week 16 or week 18 or week 17, only a couple snaps in that game. And so really just inconsistent, right? As a prospect, one thing I wrote about him was his inconsistency from his accuracy. And I think that's the big concern when you talk about Will Levis. But that QB 23 value is fun to look at. We're going to be looking at the values there. And if you're looking for that, hey, take a shot on that QB 23 or 28 range that could possibly bring back value, think of Baker Mayfield is still relevant. All these quarterbacks that have been relevant, Geno Smith, all these guys, there might be an opportunity for you to go buy him. And then he performs better than QB 23, and then you definitely have some value to play with. When you look at it from just a by the numbers perspective last year, I think, overall, the big thing is, turnover worthy play percentage at 4%. You'd like to see him get that down. Big throw percentage kind of went down as the season progressed. His only other game that he really did well in was Miami, week 14. He had the 300 yards and a touchdown that you can see there, but he also had an interception. That was a QB 15 finish. Outside of that, besides that QB 6 finish he had in week 8, he was essentially a QB 18 to 31. So basically, he was a QB 24. He's QB 2, right? In fantasy. So I think the big question is like, what is his value, right? What is he going for right now in those leagues? Now, these are all 12-team super flex tied in premium leagues. This is what he's going for. Will Levis for a first. If you can pivot off of Levis for a first, I think you do that, because I do think that you can buy a veteran quarterback for a first later if you are a contender. I think that there's less risk in that first than there is with Will Levis. And if it's projected anywhere from 1 to 9, obviously probably not early, but hey, things happen in Dynasty. The guy thinks he's contending, he has an injury, and he kind of falls apart. I would definitely ship him for that. Now, the one area that I think is interesting for Will Levis, because I've seen this deal multiple times, not just once, Will Levis for JJ McCarthy. So I think what's happening right now with JJ being out for the year, I do think if you're a rebuilder and you have Will Levis, go get JJ McCarthy. I saw a deal for Will Levis, JJ McCarthy in a third, extra draft capital, that off ramp that we talk about. I think that is a hell of a deal. If you can move Will Levis for JJ McCarthy on a rebuilding team, you go do that right now. Go check your league, see where you're at, and see if you can do that, because the upside with JJ in that offense is too much. Like, I love him in that offense. I understand Levis could take off with a new coaching staff, but I don't ever see him being in that QB1 range with McCarthy, with the weapons that he has and with his rushing ability. I think he could be, right? A low-end QB1 at that. Now, Will Levis for Blake Coleman a second. Will Levis for Bryce Young. That's the ultimate who card, right? Bryce is getting valued around that same price mark. For a 26 first, again, if you're looking to get Levis and buy him, maybe you move that 26 first, less concern about where it's going to be, and 2 years out so you can still pivot and kind of make deals. Will Levis and Jameson Williams for George Pickens. Again, what is Ayuk doing? The Steelers, what's going on with that? As the time of recording this, that hasn't been happening yet. So you're really buying a possible wide receiver 1/2 for Levis and Jameson Williams. And that's really the ultimate card, because Levis and Jameson Williams value could dip here. And then Levis, T. Higgins, and a first for Kyler Murray. So buying up for Kyler. I love getting Kyler Murray at that price. I don't mind doing that if I'm a contender and I really want that QB5 upside, right? Top 5 QB there. But that's where Levis is going on. But it just the 2 deals that really strike to me, right? The first, obviously, so you can pivot off of it, but the McCarthy deal. If I have Will Levis and I'm looking at my team, it's middle of the pack rebuilding team, I'm going to go get JJ McCarthy. I don't mind kicking down the road a little bit, especially if I'm not a contender whatsoever. The running back we're going to be talking about in the 23 class, Devon Chan. I know we've talked about him a little bit on this channel in terms of what he's been able to do and his upside from a fantasy perspective. We know last year he looked really good. He finished as fantasy points per game running back 5, right? So that explosiveness was there. Unfortunately, the haters can say he got injured, right? And that's what they're always worried about him with that size. But you have to like what he did. In those 8 games that he played, 41% of the snaps, he averaged 14 touches, 113 total yards. I mean, really, really efficient, really good with the football. Football, second in yards after contact. So that's one thing that stood out, is that, hey, he was able to withstand some. We'll look at the kind of the PFF numbers and go over there. But I think the big thing from camp that we've been hearing, which I think is a positive, he put on weight. You have to like that he put on weight and muscle. They talked about his ability to have muscle there to kind of withstand it. He understands to get that full workload, he's going to have that. Now, still has Mostert there. We're talking about Jalen Wright being there. Like, they have competition in that backfield. But again, with the targets, he had 37 last year. McGinnis has talked about him getting more involved in the passing game. So from a PPR standpoint, you have to like that. He put on the muscle. He's looked pretty good in camp. There's a lot of positives going on with Devon Chan that you should know about. Now, when you're talking about just his by the numbers last year, I mean, you can see his elusive rating is through the roof, almost 150. Missed tackles force was really good. Yards after contact. He was a very, very good running back last year in a lot of games. And I think that big game against Denver, where he had the 203 yards rushing, 30 yards, receiving. He had the 4 total touchdowns. Absolute phenomenal game. But he was pretty consistent. When he was healthy, he's a top 10 back. That's really where you should be valued at. Now, as far as where his value is out there, it's interesting. This is super flex. I saw a Chan for Dak Prescott. I mean, I would take Dak all day in a super flex league. But these are the values going out there for JJ McCarthy. As we just mentioned, Will Levis. JJ is a very hot traded commodity right now. A chain for Rashee Rice in a first. I love the Rashee Rice in the first side. We're going to be getting to Rashee Rice here in a minute. But again, I don't mind either side, right? If you need a running back and you feel like he could be a top 5 guy, this is why I show you these deals, because it depends on where your trade value is, trade market. I can come on here and say buy, sell, whatever, but it really kind of depends where your trade value is, but also where your team's at. If you're a middle of the pack, I wouldn't be selling a first and a Rashee Rice for Devon Chan just because of the injury, the liability there. But if you're a top 4 team and you need a running back, I'd make that deal. I'm okay kind of taking that risk there. Now, next one's for, a chain and a second for Amari Cooper and Josh Jacobs. I like the youth in that deal. Call Dalton Kincaid in a second for chain and a fourth. Again, I kind of like Dalton Kincaid in that area if it's tied in premium. And you get that second, that off ramp there. And next one, a chain for Keon Coleman in a first. Again, I like a chain if I'm a contender. I'm going to go for it. I think most of these deals outside the Dak deal is a fair deal if you're a contender trying to go get that running back that have top 5 upside. But if you're in that middle pack, be very careful going after these guys. And I do think that maybe you could pivot off a chain, because I do think that, I put a poll out today on social media. I said, hey, will he be a top 5 guy? Well, you think he's going to finish in the top 5? And 60% said no. So just understanding the market and what people think the market is right now for him, I think these are fair deals, but maybe a guy really thinks he is going to be that top guy. You can use that to your advantage in your leagues. Now, at the wide receiver position, Rashee Rice. I mean, keep talking about him. Look at that value dip that some of y'all. I got Rashee Rice out there. In that May range after all the legal trouble. For me, when you're looking at Rashee, I think with Marquise Brown being injured now, right? I still buy into that. He's one of the more talented wide receivers in that room. I know Xavier Worthy there and Travis Kelce is there. But when you look at him, he averaged 10.9 fantasy points per game. But after week 6, I mean, he averaged 12.1 points. I mean, that put him as a top 20 guy. So you have to like that. I do understand that the target competition is going to be there, but he still had 102 targets last year as a rookie. And with Marquise Brown being down, right? Who knows what's going to happen with Travis Kelce? Could he get injured, get a little banged up? Xavier Worthy is a rookie. I love Xavier Worthy. Everyone knows that. But again, you could be looking at Rashee Rice being that guy for them. I really, really believe that Rashee is going to kind of establish himself this year as being that go-to guy for Patrick Mahomes. And sitting there at wide receiver 29, I love that value. Now, what is the legal trouble? He hasn't even been interviewed from the last time I looked by the NFL. So I do think that this year is pretty close to he's going to be okay. I think following year, you're in a little bit of trouble. But this year, I'm down. I don't even think get a little bit of trouble. I think that he's going to get off. Or maybe a slap on the wrist or whatever. I still think he's worth trading for. He was definitely worth trading for down there in May. Like I mentioned, I talked about that a lot and did it myself. But even if you didn't, hey, you can still get him. Now, from a PFF standpoint, he did pretty good. When you're looking at the numbers in the receiving grade, I thought Rashee Rice really separated himself in a lot of different games last year. I think earning the targets, Las Vegas, the 8 catches, 10 targets, 107 yards and a touchdown there. But when you look at just down the stretch, this was his down the stretch targets. from week 12 and on, 10, 9, 10, 9, 12, and 6. Like he really kind of established up. And I know there was bang injuries and I know there was things going on there, but that just shows me that, Mahomes and this offense trust me. And they went to him in the Super Bowl, right? Remember, they trusted him there. Now, some deals out there going for him. Rice and a first for Jared Goff. So if you need a quarterback 2 and a solid quarterback 2, that's a deal worth making, right? Jared Goff, I think, is going to be a very solid quarterback 2, and he got a contract, so his dynasty value is pretty insulated. Rice for Hollywood Brown, Deontay Johnson. I love Deontay. I take Rashee Rice in this deal. I think that Rashee Rice at the youth, the younger, tied to Patrick Mahomes. He's only 24. Give me Rashee Rice there. 25 first is pretty where he's going as a late first kind of area. Rashee Rice and Brandon Ayuk for Garrett Wilson. I'm on the Garrett Wilson side on that one. But if you have Brandon Ayuk and Rashee and you can peer up to a guy like Garrett Wilson, I would 100% do that. I would definitely be comfortable doing that. Rice for Kyle Pitts. Again, Pitts is getting kind of valued at 6 to 8 range, and in tight end premium, a little bit higher. For Rice, I do think that you can get probably something else if you're going to move Pitts for just that. I do think that there's some extra draft capital and off ramp that you can grab there. Rice in a third for DK Metcalf. So again, getting that extra capital back for DK could be nice, especially if you're in that mid-tier to rebuilding team. And then Rice for Devontae Adams. Again, that's a total just win now compared to not. And I'm okay kind of moving off of Adams for Rice. Probably want something back though for that one. At the tight end position, we're going Dalton Kincaid, Buffalo Bills tight end. He's pretty locked in at that, that tight end 3 to 4 range. And a lot of it has to do with just, hey, he's tied into Josh Allen in that offense. But last year, week 7 to 18, he was 7th in target, share, 9th in receiving yards per game, first read share, he's at 21%, 12th in yards per route run. So he's right there, right? And when we're talking about him with Stephon Diggs moving on and just having that open there, there's a possibility Dalton Kincaid, we're talking about being the number 1 target getter on this team. I do know people like Khalil Shakir. They drafted Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, James Cook, for example. They have all those guys out there. Why can't Kincaid be the number 1 guy in that offense? I think there's a possibility, right? I've never been a truther of Kincaid, but the value and the target share is just it's too hard to just pass up and say, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. I think that when you see that, I understand they're probably going to go a little 12 personnel with Knox there too, but I think Kincaid can be a slot guy, right? When we're talking about them moving out, being more versatile out there, I think Kincaid fits that role. And then last year, really the numbers that come out and they pop out to you when you're kind of looking down the stretch, the targets are there, but against Cincinnati, that was a huge game for him in week 9. You'll see it there, 10 receptions, 11 targets, 81 yards, very, very solid there. And again, down the stretch, New England, Miami, those were 2 of his best games. He was tight end 7 weekly finish in standard formats. And in PPR, when you look at it, he was tight end 7 and 2 in both those weeks. And really what it always comes down to with tight ends, because of that, when you talk about tight ends and that touchdown dependency, it also matters for targets and just receptions overall, right? Because, if you score a touchdown as a tight end, you're probably going to be a top 12 guy. But if you can have 8 targets, 7 catches, which Dalton Kincaid can do, and then add that touchdown there, he's a week in, week out top 5 guy, right? Now, what his price is, 25 first, that's pretty fair if you're looking at tight end premium. Njoku in a first. So if you think Njoku's going to have a good year, you're okay with your roster where it's at, and you're okay just grabbing Njoku, being that top 12-ish guy around there, and then getting that first back, that's a really good strategy. I do not mind that strategy. I would have probably went, you can go for Njoku, Jake Ferguson, one of those guys, and add that first. Kincaid for Devon Chan and a second. Dalton Kincaid, Jalen Wright for Sam Laporta. So if you want to tier up to Laporta, you add Jalen Wright in a Miami offense that should benefit him there. Kincaid for Tank Dell, Kincaid for Evan Ingram, Xavier Worthy, and Kincaid for Bo Nix and 25 first. So he's being priced at an elite price, right? So when we're thinking of where his asset and his value is, he is getting priced at that maximum value. But because of the situation, because of where he's at, and because the targets that could possibly come in his way, he could be a game changer. He could be a fantasy league winner if he's able to kind of earn those targets, and that's positive. That's a positive sign. You've heard positive camp reports. Those are the things you want to see. Now, I appreciate you guys watching. I want to also shout out, because we don't ever plug it enough, our Patreon. We have a patreon.com at the Devy Royale. We have 3 different tiers, the Riley Day and Saban tier, but we also have a Substack that you get access to there. So you can actually You can actually subscribe to the Substack and just get our Substack articles. We're doing betting, Devy, college football, rankings, all different types of content over there. Or you just pay for the day tier. You get all of our rankings combined, Dynasty Devy, Dynasty rankings as well. Any of the content we do, Jay Stein's database, everything on that site for our Patreon that you get, plus Discord access for $5, plus the Substack. It's one of the best deals in fantasy. So go check that out. We appreciate you guys watching today, but we hope to see you in the Patreon.